Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt is defending Bible distribution in schools. He says religious freedoms are under attack. And joining us now in studio is Scott Pruitt. Sir, thank you for your time today.
Good day.
Well, thanks for joining us, and this is a hot topic in the state. Can you expound on your statements?
You know, not only in the state, but across the country, and I think more broadly than just the distribution of religious literature, there's a debate going on nationally about what does the First Amendment protect. And there are many folks nationally that believe that the First Amendment really is just a protection of the right to worship. That you can attend church on Sundays or whatever day, Saturdays in synagogue, worship, pray, sing, learn Scripture. But if you then export from that church outside the four walls into the public square what you believe, whether it's in the public schools or in the public square generally, there are many that believe that that First Amendment does not provide that protection. That's the debate philosophically that's going on across the country. And the First Amendment is very clear. I mean, the Founding Fathers put the Bill of Rights in place to secure liberties to you and I, to keep the government from dictating conscience or us exercising our conscience. And these battles that we see taking place across the country and in Oklahoma are really a reflection of that debate.
So as far as allowing religious material, let's say Bibles in this case, in the schools, what can schools allow?
Well, I mean, the group and the situation that occurred here in Oklahoma was more of, categorically, the Freedom from Religion Foundation said that categorically that you cannot distribute religious literature. That is simply not the case. You can distribute religious literature with certain time, place, and manner, certain open forum, neutral policies that the district can adopt. And it happens across the country. The Bible is literature, can be used. Students can, if another student says to one student, can you get me a Bible or can I have a Bible? Obviously students can share. There can be Bible studies on campus. There are equal access issues both before and after school. We saw right here in the Oklahoma City metro area where the Green family adopted a Bible as literature curriculum, which is entirely permissible. And Mustang Public Schools, they were approaching, implementing that curriculum, and this same organization came in and had communications of potential litigation. And so the Mustang Public Schools withdrew from that. So we see this taking place, these flashpoints occurring in the public school setting. The Supreme Court has been very clear. Students, teachers, administrators do not shed their constitutional rights, including the First Amendment, when they enter the schoolhouse gate.
Talking with Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt, and let's talk a little more specifics about this, sir. Who can disseminate this material, Bibles, religious pamphlets? Can teachers do it? Can schools do it? Is it organizations? It's
all related to policies, and they have to be neutral policies that are adopted in advance that doesn't discriminate nor endorse any particular faith over another. And so the key here is what we're seeking to do as an office is provide guidance to school districts in advance on steps they can take to accommodate the religious conscience of both teachers and students on campus. And I think what happens in these kind of scenarios, Dave, is you have a specific situation, and this is not intended to just address what happened in Chakota or eastern Oklahoma. You'll have a specific situation, and an organization will come in and threaten a lawsuit, and then the objective is just to remove all vestiges of religious conscience or all vestiges of religious expression. And that clearly is not consistent with the First Amendment. So our focus at this point as an office, much like we do with open meeting, much like we do with Open Record Act compliance with boards and commissions and state agencies, is to offer to school districts across the state, here we'll come alongside, provide help to you on adopting policies to accommodate religious viewpoint that is consistent with the First Amendment and consistent with Supreme Court precedent.
Would this be a consistent policy statewide or district by district, or?
Well, I think the approach would be on a district by district basis to respond to them as they request, to help them understand there's so much misinformation in the marketplace about what can and cannot be done in the public schools generally. And so our effort would be simply to try to educate and inform them about what can and cannot be done, and then how to accommodate religious expression within the public schools.
Let me ask you this on even a more detailed question. Could this be all school levels, meaning elementary through high school?
I think clearly that as you look at policies that would be adopted, secondary schools, age groups are different maybe perhaps as far as policies you would adopt there versus elementary school students. But that is something that would need to be done on a case-by-case basis. There's history for this. I mean, actually, the Vanderbilt University has a First Amendment Center And years ago, in fact, I participated in this in the early 1990s, they had something called Common Ground, where they would come into a school district and invite parents and teachers and administrators and stakeholders and then address these issues in advance and find common ground on how to allow for the expression of religious expression in the public schools. It's very important that you do that in advance, as opposed to this case-by-case situation where groups come in and say, you can't do that, and then categorically say that it has to be eliminated, which is not the case.
Talking with Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt, I believe you sent a letter to the school districts about this, and Freedom from Religion Foundation responded to that letter saying they're concerned that it's misleading, if not irresponsible advice. I don't know if you had a chance to look at their response. Any response from you to their response?
You know, our effort is not really to get into a situation of responding to specifically what occurred there with the distribution of the Gideon Bibles, because that's a factual type of analysis that needs to take place. That clearly has been resolved already. Our focus is more about prospectively, how do we help teachers, students, administrators across the state actually accommodate the religious conscience of those folks within the public school context. All too often, what happens is that when someone like the Green family brings the Bible as literature to a school district, there is interest by a school board. There is interest to incorporate that for many reasons. And then a letter comes from an organization either inside or outside the state and says, you better not do that, and just try to categorically say that it's not permitted, and then have this veiled threat of litigation. And that puts the school boards and superintendents in a very difficult position, because clearly they don't want to take steps that would cause exposure and liability and damages, and so they just withdraw, and they try to create a religious sterility within the public schools context. And that is just entirely inconsistent with the First Amendment. The First Amendment says that students, teachers, and administrators do not shed their constitutional rights when they enter the schoolhouse gate. There are rights of religious expression that they possess, and there are many opportunities for that to occur so long as it's done consistent with policies adopted by the school district in advance. And so this is an effort by my office to help empower school districts, to help empower students and parents and administrators understand that we don't have to have the either-or approach. And hopefully it's something that will help going forward.
One last question for you. Have districts approached you or your office saying, hey, we need some guidelines, some policies here, or are you seeing some of these instances and saying, let's go ahead and have this discussion?
I was aware of the situation with Mustang Public Schools. There have been some situations nationally with this organization that in Wisconsin, I don't know if you're aware or not, unrelated to the public school context, but this organization actually sued the IRS and said that the IRS needed to be more forceful and aggressive at trying to address churches who may be electioneering. And the law since 1954 is that pastors cannot endorse candidates from the pulpit. Now, I think there's some constitutional concerns with that, but just setting that aside for a second, that 1954 Johnson Amendment says that pastors can't endorse from the public a candidate. It's never addressed content. Pastors who address the issue of pro-life and sanctity of life historically have been protected because it's something they're teaching Scripture and they're addressing content. This organization sued the IRS saying that they should take a more aggressive posture and perhaps take C3 status away from churches who are quote-unquote electioneering, and they interpret that as addressing content and not just candidate endorsement. So this organization is not isolated, unfortunately, in the review of the First Amendment. They have a very broad view of the Establishment Clause and a very narrow view of the Free Exercise Clause, and it puts them in tension. And the Founding Fathers never intended that. Both the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause were meant to be read together to secure your liberty and my liberty, our ability to express our religious conscience in the public square. So that's what it's about.
Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt, sir, again, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave.